Well, I appreciate Ted because he's the only person I look up to. Hey, I want to thank you for that question. That's what I'm about to talk about. So, the thing I love about Silicon Valley is our mantra. If you can measure it, you can manage it. And I love being in a place like that. The question then is, what do you measure? What matters? And you can measure your 401k, you can measure your GPA, you can measure your kids' GPA, you can measure your stock portfolio, you can measure the square footage of your house, which is worth just insane amounts of money here in Silicon Valley. And those are all good things. But I want to ask you, when you face the judgment seat, are those things that God's going to care about? And to be frank, I don't think so. So then the question is, well, what's actually worth measuring? And what's interesting is that in Luke chapter 7, John the Baptist sends his disciples to ask Jesus, are you the Messiah? And he answers in 222 characters in the Greek with the proof that he's the Messiah. It fits in a tweet or an X or whatever Zuckerberg or Elon Musk wants to call it these days. I don't even know. This is his answer. The blind receive sight. Well, actually, what he says is, go and tell your disciples what you've seen and heard. In other words, here's the data. Here's the data that proves I'm the Messiah. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Now that is worth measuring. When we face the judgment seat, that's the stuff that God cares about. And yet I know very few churches, very few companies, very few organizations, very few people that are saying, let's measure that. So 3 years ago, a group of us got together and said, hey, let's work on measuring that. This is my wife, she's on the last one. This is my wife, Dr. Angie Bymaster. Actually, Ted's wife, Sandra Haas, was our first patient. And we said, hey, let's go out and measure that and see what happens. And praise God, now we're 3.5 years later, and it's happening. I want to share a quick story about the lame walk. Oh, does the sound not work? Okay, so this is Juan. I met him on the corner of First and Alma. Juan doesn't have legs. He's Colombian. His legs were blown off at the age of 12 when a hand grenade went off from a FARC attack underneath him. I met him just a few months ago on the street. Here he is climbing up his stairs to get back to his house after panhandling. I pulled over and asked Juan, what's going on? And Juan told me that his dream was to receive legs. He had immigrated from Colombia to get legs. So the Healing Grove team jumps into action, and we got Juan legs, the lame walk. Now, this story gets better. Juan came in just a few weeks ago. He showed us his legs, and then he showed us his plane ticket back to Colombia, where he could go back and now provide for his family. 30 years later, the guy has legs, and now he can provide for his family. The lame walk. That's what I want to measure. Now, here's the reality. Silicon Valley is one of the wealthiest places in the world, and yet we have a lot of poverty, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. In Silicon Valley, which we define as Santa Clara and San Mateo County, so this isn't even including San Francisco County, there are 12,000 homeless people. Underneath the surface, there are 300,000 people living in poverty, of which almost 180,000 are children. We have a lot of poverty, that's living in the shadow of affluence. And the question is, how do we proclaim good news to the poor at scale? Here's, I think, what the problem, this is what the gentleman was asking back there. We have this idea that there are two forms of organizations. There are for-profits that exist to make money and create employment. And there are nonprofits that offer, services and referrals to low-income clients. And we put them in completely separate categories. And the problem is it's very difficult to scale nonprofit solutions because you're dependent on the benevolence of donors, which I would love to say that Silicon Valley is a generous place. The data suggests otherwise. We have data in Silicon Valley, people on average give about 0.8% of their income. In case you didn't know the math, they keep 99.2%. Christians are a little bit better. Church Attending Christians give about 3 or 3.5%. But we are not really generous people, even though we have so much wealth. So we came up with this idea of let's mix those. Let's sell a service and use the money to generate income to care for the poor. So we came up with this model where we actually sell at Healing Grove Health Center, we sell concierge primary care for $200 a month. You get same-day appointments, 30 to 60-minute appointments with your doctor. You get a doctor that both prays and prescribes. We're the only Christian primary healthcare in Silicon Valley. You get the personal cell phone of your doctor. And then what's cool is every paying member funds 2 low-income uninsured people. So we are a nonprofit. We do solicit donations and grants, but we're also selling a product, and that has allowed us to scale very quickly. So we launched in 2020 with a hope and a prayer, and we were totally broke. This is a picture of a dilapidated building that we refurbished. A team of us got together that included, I want to recognize Sandy Kang right here, who is our originating board chair and one of our founding members. By the end of the year, we'd refurbish the building and launch operation, and we're seeing hundreds of patients. And today, 3 years later, we've gone from seeing hundreds of patients a year to this year, we've done 12,000 patient visits. We've grown, yeah, praise God for that. We've expanded to 4 sites with a 5th one coming online. We're working with low-income Spanish-speaking refugees in San Jose and recently arrived Afghan refugees in Sacramento, where we're proclaiming good news to the poor. We've seen hundreds of people come to Christ, lives transformed. We've seen the blind see, the lame walk, the dead raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. So, I want you to just put out your hands. And I want you to ask the question, what has God put in your hands? What ideas, what resources, what finances, what organization? I'm captivated by this passage in Luke chapter 15 where Jesus said, I tell you, use your worldly wealth. And doesn't that apply to us here? Use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, and it will be gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. What has God put into your hands that you can use to gain friends on this earth so that we can celebrate in the eternal dwelling? That might be a for-profit company. That might be a nonprofit organization. That might be an idea. That might be a relationship. I don't know what it is, but God has put something in your hands. Proclaim good news to the poor. Let me give you an example. We had hired a sports director, a guy named Noé Guzman from the neighborhood, grew up really poor, awesome coach. And we launched it as a nonprofit program. So kids in low-income communities don't have access to sports. Soccer costs $10,000 a year. It's crazy how expensive it is. So we fundraised. We launched a program serving low-income kids in the community. We've served hundreds of kids that would otherwise have no access to sports. Actually, in our first summer, we had 50 kids who on average lost 6 pounds. I mean, it works, right? And so my wife signed up my son for a volleyball camp, a weekend volleyball camp. And we paid $400 for volleyball camp, which killed me. So he gets home and I said, well, how was it? And he said, well, it was okay, but Coach Noé is better than what we paid for. And it was like a light bulb. Ding! We have a service that we can sell. And so now we're launching Healing Grove Sports, where we're selling summer camps for $175 a week to people with means. And every paying member funds a low-income kid to get the same high-quality access to sports programs so that their lives can be transformed. And what we're able to do is we work in low-income communities where we have very high adverse childhood experiences, kids who've experienced abuse and all kinds of problems like we were just talking about. And we're able to use sports as a vehicle to achieve true healing in Jesus Christ so that they can have confidence and dignity so that they can grow up into the kind of adults that can support themselves. So I want you to think about what's in your hands. And as you think about what's in your hands, I want you to think about, what are you measuring? Because what you measure matters. What would it be like for you to measure the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor?
Thank you so much. My wife, stay up here. Put enough time on. We're going to get Adrian's up next, and he's on at 11:30 sharp. And praise God, I believe in a God of miracles. the program is back on track. My wife was undiagnosed with pernicious anemia, which once it's diagnosed is great news. But if you don't know what it is, it's very scary, the symptoms of ALS. And I was in a networking meeting and connected with Brett. And so if you didn't notice, Brett is a Christian. He's a follower of Jesus. If any of you were mildly offended by what he was sharing, I mean, he's my type of guy, you know, prove it by what you, show it, you know. Trust me, he's an equal opportunity offender, and he has offended far more Christians than he's offended non-Christians. Anyways, I met him at a networking meeting, and we just connected about our passion for helping the poor. And then I cried on his shoulder and said, you know, my wife's dying, and I don't know what's going on. And he says, well, let me introduce her to my wife, and maybe she can help. And she says she does. She basically says she has a gift of discernment. She practices medicine as unto the Lord, and she integrates her faith into her medical practice. It sure felt to me like she was in touch with a higher power. She diagnosed my wife in the first time, even though she had never had a case of pernicious anemia before, and it was kind of complicated. 13 experts had just pawned her off. And when we went in, when the whole world was locked down, we got the diagnosis that she started injecting herself with B12. And talk about the lame walk. I mean, she started walking again and recovered. So I'm a huge fan. We have time, and I love this model. You know, there's a big divide between rich care and poor care. And Adrian's going to share probably about the biggest divide. He's coming up next. But, you know, our nation is divided. In the rich care, you can get some of the best care in the world. But if you're poor, we give you poor care, and it sucks. And they've got a new model where we go in there, and it's high class, and they're serving a certain clientele that demands certain expectations. And they provide that same to the uninsured, which is so powerful as they're saving the city boatloads of money. So we just have to make the case, show the data. It's cheaper to do it this way. So we have time for one concise question. Eric.
Hey, Brent, thank you for everything you're doing. I know CalAIM is getting more active, especially with Medi-Cal patients, to extend services into care management and housing navigation and so on like that. Is that something you guys can take advantage of and expand services, especially to those that are on Medi-Cal or Medi-Cal eligible, and how can other communities potentially participate in expanding some of their healthcare services?
Yeah, Medi-Cal is going to go through a really significant expansion in 2024. Undocumented people will qualify for Medi-Cal. So there's going to be about 2 million people that come on Medi-Cal. Unfortunately, Medi-Cal reimbursement rates are set up such that primary care clinics basically can't stay in business. So we call Medi-Cal a fishing license. You know, when you buy a fishing license, you pay for it, but it doesn't guarantee that you catch a fish. That's what Medi-Cal is like. And when 2 million more people enter into Medi-Cal, the system is just profoundly broken. And so we are going to need more people who step up, who are willing to step out of the fee-for-service system and create, you know, innovative business models where we're able to care for poor people at scale. To give you an idea, we do accept Medi-Cal at Healing Grove. It costs us more to administer the program than we get from it. So in other words, it would be cheaper for me to not take Medi-Cal than to take it. It pays that badly. However, we have to take it so that we can be the primary care provider. So we use our concierge fees to subsidize the money that we lose on Medi-Cal. But yeah.
This is why we're having this meeting. I'm thinking of some brilliant technologists coming alongside, helping to make the case, to show the data. We show the data, decreasing the iteration between policy and changes, you know, and aligning the incentives. Right now, our policymakers have a certain set of incentives, and we can, you know, like Ben said with a bit of humor, you know, don't blame the stupid people if you voted for them, you know? And I don't think that's necessarily the way to say it. The people who are elected win the game of being elected. But we've got to provide better tools for us to advocate, to vote better, but also on the flip side, tools for policymakers to make better policies.
So you brought up a couple other things. You know, we're getting into like using Medi-Cal to do, you know, youth interventions. There's all sorts of tools. At the end of the day, though, I actually don't think that the policymakers are the solution. I think you're the solution. And if each of us stepped up and loved one person or 5 people, we could solve all the problems. Okay, let me just tell you this. So if church attending Christians in Silicon Valley went from 3% to 10%, okay, we could generate $4 billion with a B dollars per year in funds that we could use for poverty alleviation. Right now, it costs about just short of $1 million to build one affordable housing unit in Santa Clara County, okay? With $4 billion, we could house every single one of the homeless people in our community in the next 4 years. In other words, without a single government dollar, without a single policymaker taking any action, homelessness could be over by 2027. Wow. Okay? You know what we're missing? It's not the way we vote. It's not who we vote for. You know what we're missing? Generosity. That's it. We have the resources. We have the land and church stock. All we're missing is the will. So let's go out and do it.
Let's do it. I love it.